Yes, good afternoon, everybody online today and also here in the room, where we have a number of participants in today's Global South Encounter as well. I'm super happy to be here and to see all of you and also the interest in today's event. I would like to say first that today's meeting is recorded. And just so that you know, could you switch? Perhaps still got it there. And without any further ado, let me open very officially today's talk about the landscapes of displacement. And we will hear about mega plantations in Southeast Asia. One more thing about the recording, perhaps, because we got a number of questions about that earlier. The recording will be made available on the usual site, and there you can then also watch again today's contributions at your own time schedule, basically. But I would like to introduce to all of you our speaker of today, and that is Professor Noboru Ishikawa. He holds a PhD in anthropology from the City University of New York. And he is professor of anthropology at the Kyoto University in Japan, Kyoto, and is at the Center for Southeast Asian Studies. And Noboru, I have to say, is a dear colleague of mine also, and we are working together, which was the reason for today's talk. We are working together since quite a number of years now. In the context of a new project that is our Fair Frontiers project, as well as the For Equal project. And from the names, you can already guess that equity, equality, and maybe I should say inequality is very central to all of these research projects we are conducting together in Southeast Asia and in the Congo Basin. And Noboru is part of an ongoing workshop right now, which also explains here the online audience, the local audience in this room. And he will introduce to all of us a framework that is one of the central frameworks we are using in our Fair Frontiers project and in the For Equal project. And this, after Noboru's talk, we will then have Dr. Helena Varkkey, which is another very special pleasure to have you here. She will act as a discussant of Noboru's talk. And after that, we will have the remaining time open for questions from the audience, online as well as here in the room. And I would like to point out that with regards to your questions online, if you are in a situation somewhere on the road, you are not able to speak or to open your microphone, please feel also free to write your questions into the chat, because we will monitor this chat. And there might be interesting questions that also maybe deserve a little bit more time and follow-up discussions with those writing them. So that was a very brief introduction, but before I hand over to Noboru, I would like to also point out that his talk is, of course, very much informed by decades of work in Sarawak in Malaysia and West Kalimantan, Indonesia. I think more than 3 decades of work, field work, Noboru Ishikawa conducted there, exploring issues such as the construction of a national space in these borderlands. Highland, lowland relations are explored, and of course the history and relations of the stateless in Southeast Asian histories, plantation systems, as well as the commodification of natural resources and relations between nature and non-nature in the Anthropocene are among the core topics of Noboru's work, which will all together inform today's talk here in the Global South Encounters. And maybe last word, perhaps a bit of the publications Noboru Ishikawa also has published over the past years. related to this topic, just to mention a few, the anthropogenic tropical forests, human-nature interfaces on the plantation frontier from 2020, as well as between frontiers, nation and identity in the Southeast Asian borderland from 2010, as well as trans-border governance of forests, flows and movements in Southeast Asia, and dislocating nation states, globalization in Asia and Africa. And as I said, both projects Noboru is contributing to for equal and fair frontiers are really reflecting on these dynamics in these frontiers and borderlands around, especially in the Congo Basin and Southeast Asia. With that, finally, Noboru, the floor is yours. The Zoom space is yours, please.
Thank you so much, Maria. It's not short and brief introduction, but wonderful introduction of my work. Thank you. Thank you. So I'll start. Oh. How come it's not? Oh, okay. So the section title first, People Without History. Before examining plantation system as a unique mode of production in human history, I would like to first to share some statistics with you. According to Arthur W. Lewis, the economist of African descent, who was awarded the Nobel Prize in 1978, the number of people who moved during the 100 years between the 18th and 19th centuries reached 100 million. That's roughly 1 million people per year. Those 100 million people were divided into two main groups, Europeans and non-Europeans. The international migration of 50 million people, 50 million Europeans, was the migration to Canada, Argentina, Uruguay, South Africa, New Zealand, Australia, the United States, and Chile being the main destinations. Many of these white immigrants settled in the social democratic societies of North and South America, passing on their family names and identities from generation to generation, and creating schooling systems that transmitted their languages, histories, and cultures. Oh, it doesn't work. Okay. In contrast, many of the 50 million on the other side of people were whose homes were either politically bankrupt regions or the colonies of Western Europe. They migrated from African continent, present-day China and India, to the Caribbean, the Americas, and Southeast Asian colonies to work. Unlike the European immigrants, many of them did not make their mark in history. In social scientific studies of plantation system, immigrants, colonial settlers, slaves, and indentured laborers have been main subject of investigation. How plantation society, quote unquote, was created, how these groups of people interacted, and how enslaved and indentured laborers contributed to create multi-ethnic social formations. There are numerous historical studies. I would argue, however, that there were yet another people without history whose lives and agencies were denied. They were indigenous people abruptly encountering foreign production systems, those who lived on commodity frontier long before the advent of plantations were neither recorded or investigated, and scant attention has been paid by historians dealing with the state system, the state space where written documentations were available. They were simply described as victims of genocide or fatal plague, and scant attention has been paid to their agencies. In the following, I will describe the local and the quotidian encounter of local communities with plantation production system, taking Sweden and Sweden cultivators and hunters and gatherers in the island of Malaysian Borneo as a case in point. The purpose of this presentation is to ethnographically investigate how indigenous communities have reacted to the advent of oil palm plantations, where two polar production systems, i.e. slash and burn cultivation and large-scale monoculture, are juxtaposed in the landscape of the tropics. How come this? Okay, into the plantation scene. I would argue that after the year of 1492, we entered a new geographical epoch, plantation scene, a subcategory of the Anthropocene. While the Anthropocene is defined in connection with the fossil fuel era, the plantation scene is an epoch characterized by the emergence of a large-scale monocropping production system across the surface of the earth. Each component of this production system, plant, land, labor, technology, and infrastructure, is mutually dependent and essential to the operation of the whole. The emergent system is the model and motor for the carbon-greedy machine-based factory system that is often cited as an inflection point for the Anthropocene. In the course of human history, the monoculture plantation was transformed. Diverse kinds of human-tended farms, pastures, and forests into extractive and enclosed plantations and multi-species forests, and the remaining refugia are being wiped out. It is important to note that so-called Columbian Exchange activities activated after 1492 was not an equal movement of goods and people between the new and old continents. The discovery of new living spaces was, in fact, the discovery of unknown resources, not only goods, but also people, labor power. New resources have changed people's lives on the global scale, leading to new forms of exploitation, institutionalization of violence, and the spread of unequal systems and injustice. Those who migrated to forest frontier commodity frontier utilized their newly acquired resources and land for economic gain. This led to the expansion of plantations or large-scale production system for commodities. According to Sydney Mintz, a leading authority of plantation studies, 10 years after Columbus' discovery, quote unquote, of the New World, Europeans had already started plantation management in the New World. During our research in Malaysian Borneo from 2010 to 2015, we have come to realize the salience nature of the plantation scene, and we capture its latest and emerging moments in maritime Southeast Asia. Compared to the Malay Peninsula, which has experienced a century of oil palm cultivation and more than 30 years of downstream industrial sector development, what we witnessed in northern Sarawak is the formative stage of plantation expansion to upstream regions. Among many resource frontiers in Southeast Asia, Sarawak occupies a peculiar historical niche where logging activity and expansion of oil palm, both by the plantation system and on smallholding basis, have proceeded simultaneously. More importantly, people's livelihoods in Sarawak are still highly dependent on biomass-rich environs. In the course of our project, we had an opportunity to examine the very early stages of transformation from a biomass-centered to land-centered regime, as well as subsistence and the trade as well as subsistence and trade to market-oriented production. In other words, the crucial moment of coming of the plantation scene was unfolding in front of our eyes during the field work. Tropical biomass society and the plantation frontier. The characteristics of plantation frontier have led to the formation of what we propose to call a tropical biomass society. Heuristically, a tropical biomass society is defined as a social formation typically found in a geoecological niche located in the equatorial zone, classified as having a tropical rainforest climate. An equatorial zone possesses the highly concentrated biome due to a combination of abundant solar energy and high precipitation. Active hydrothermal circulation makes tropical rainforests fertile ground for the regeneration of biome. Plantation frontiers with high level of biodiversity are generally found between central and the southern tropics. In maritime Southeast Asia, tropical biomass societies are located in Borneo, the Malay Peninsula, Sumatra, and the Philippines. General characteristics of social formation of a biomass society are the following. First, a plantation frontier is not an isolated one. It is a mercantile and a capitalist space connected to global commodity chains. Due to the rapid pace of regeneration and abundance of biomass, tropical biomass societies have historically engaged with various modes of biomass commodification. High biomass and high biodiversity have led to the extraction of forest produce for export, leading to the formation of global commodity chains. Second, a plantation frontier is a multi-livelihood space whose inhabitants are capable of practicing combined modes of subsistence. Local people are engaged in swidden cultivation, foraging, forest produce trade, and off-farm wage labor. Livelihoods have been secured through diversified economic portfolios. Third, an indigenous community on the plantation frontier is non-agrarian. With low population pressure, both biodiversity and biomass are retained. As a result, the requirement for producing and securing stocks for resources by settled agriculture remains low. A tropical biomass society is essentially a society based on flow and exchange rather than stock derived from agricultural production. Agriculture, when practiced, is supplementary and not the sole or major means of livelihood. While people may engage in subsistence farming, their access to commodity chains and off-farm labor markets enable the diversified strategies of living. Fourth, communities on the plantation frontier of the tropics value biomass cover more than land itself. Rather than ownership, the usufruct operation of land and the maintenance of commons provide a foundation for its sustainability. The absence of private land ownership, coupled with usufruct operations, for inviting a drastic and large-scale land use change. Fifth, commodity frontier communities exhibit a high degree of flexibility to accommodate and respond to changes brought about by outsiders. When such flexible response generates too drastic a change, a move beyond a certain tipping point, a regime shift may take place. Tropical societies are exposed large-scale anthropogenic land use change and enter a phase of massive transformation or regime shift. In these instances, an environment-dependent subsistence economy is replaced by smallholding-based commodity production and rural-urban migration. The plantation as social complex and infrastructure. The very particular nature of oil palm also has contingent effect on the social formation of the riverine society under study. As an industrial commodity, fresh fruit bunches need to be processed within 24 hours so as to avoid oxidation, which lowers the quality of the product. It is therefore essential that oil palm fruits are processed by heat treatment immediately after harvest and before oil extraction in order to deactivate the lipase, an enzyme naturally present in the seed. The oxidation process triggered by the lipase, a micro change at the molecular level, is indeed and in fact a driving force of drastic, grandiose social and landscape change in our research site. Traditional maritime and the riverine society is being transformed to a land-bound one with road networks for transformation of fruit bunches to processing mills. The advent of oil palm plantations stand not only for the introduction of a new mode of corporate production, but also the establishment of spatial linkages between upriver cultivation sites with downriver production sites. Oil palm production requires an industrial complex comprising road networks and mills. And local people in vicinity of plantation are simultaneously incorporated into the system. Our research witnessed and documented a very initial moment of the emergence of oil palm smallholders on the commodity frontier. With the advent of road connection, many residents moved to the roadside at some distance from their longhouse, traditional longhouses that are traditionally located along the river. Now, a long stretch of temporary huts can be found, and oil palm seeds harvested by local people are brought to refinery mills attached to plantation companies. The emergence of the plantation as a social complex not only leads to the spatial reconfiguration of the basin society, but also brings local communities into a profoundly contested situation. With the advent of plantation complex, the object of appropriation has shifted from extraction of biomass on land to land itself. In the riverine society under study, natural resources on the land surface, both timber and non-timber, have been valued for subsistence and the trade activities for generations. Today, the land and the soil have become devices for production, where new biomass is cultivated through the domestication of plants. This new mode of biomass generation, both in plantations as well as by smallholders, requires an operational condition in which labor mobilization, capital investment, and the land as a commodity become essential for continued operation. what we observe now in the basin society of Central Malaysia, Central Sarawak, is the rapid development of plantations leading to accumulation by disposition, with indigenous communities having compromised access to land. Juxtaposition and new interfaces. In conclusion, I wish to delineate some of the socio-ecological characteristics of the plantation scene through our study of one small area of the Central Sarawak frontier. Many of the changes, social and ecological, and combination of the two are derived from interfaces formed when different and often distant landscapes, people, and things come into contact. Such new encounters or spatial juxtapositions have led to a temporal compression of succession. The transplanting and mobilization and proliferation, reduction, and local extinction of plants, flora, and even human settlement in a relatively short period of time. We found that this compression of both space and time is an important feature of plantation frontier. The landscapes are juxtaposed by force. For instance, when communally managed forest and plantation meet, this leads to a coexistence of nature and non-nature, or encounter of first nature with capitalist nature, borrowing the words of Anthropocene. As we have seen in the plantation frontier of Central Sarawak, the juxtaposition of peat swamp forest, culturally preserved communal forest, swidden fields, reduced impact logging sites, logged over forests, acacia planted forests, and oil palm plantations lead to habitat fragmentation, where a habitat is being increasingly divided into more isolated pieces. Yet, there may be a chance for coexistence of first nature and capitalist nature on this plantation frontier. Our study has shown that reduced impact logging practices are the one effective way to prevent biodiversity loss. In addition, the initiative and conscious effort on the part of local peasant society would contribute to the maintenance of well-balanced, high-quality mixed landscape consisting of remnant communally engaged forest, swidden fields, secondary forest, and oil palm cultivation. Spatial compression not only brings changes to ecological communities, but also to humans. In the maritime frontier of Southeast Asia, profound changes have occurred, both at the level of micro landscapes as well as micro household. Through the construction of road network that link upriver and downriver supply chains, distant people are reconnected in a new manner, distinctively different from relationship of the past, based on riverine and maritime network. The landscape changes when people migrate to the roadside from the riverside in order to plant their own oil palm. The social ties previously maintained along maritime riverine lines are now giving way to terrestrial ones. At the household level, families are spatially extended and consist of urban wage earners, as well as those who stay close to cultivated oil palm forests inland. Labor, as well as remittance from urban family members, often support senior members of the community who engaged in production of the oil palm in their longhouses. Spatial compression leads to a new kind of rural-urban continuum, while pre-urban space is functionally diminishing. So in lieu of conclusion, the ecological, spatial, social, and cultural compression that takes place along extended commodity chains is the characteristics of the plantation scene. Since Sydney Mintz first discussed the Caribbean region as oikumene, a Greek meaning inhabited space on the earth, the plantation frontier throughout the world has been repopulated by people, fauna, and flora from elsewhere. They mixed together and formed a distinctive niche in world history. Such plantation scene space, however, was only recently assimilated into social science, according to Sydney Mintz. Belatedly, we are adding new pages to the examination from the perspective of multidisciplinary research that combines social and natural sciences. Further research would yield, I hope, comparable data and ethnographic accounts to enable us to understand the specificity of the human-centered epoch of which we are all a part. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Noboru, for your talk and for the really thought-provoking insights you are putting forward here. I would now invite Dr. Helena Varkkey to discuss what we just heard and the attached papers to this talk. But before you do so, Helena, please allow me to also introduce you briefly, but maybe a little bit longer as well, because there's always so much to say. So Dr. Helena Varkkey is a senior lecturer at the Department of International and Strategic Studies at the University of Malaysia in Kuala Lumpur. And Dr. Helena's research focuses very much, besides the governance of haze pollution, also on the political economy of oil palm plantations and oil palm production. She tries to, so more broadly said, she seeks to understand how economic development can actually be reconciled with sustainability and sustainability questions in resource-rich regions as we have in Southeast Asia, but also in the Congo Basin and other regions of this world. The findings from her PhD at the University of Sydney have been published in a book, I think in 2016, as part of the Routledge Malaysian Study Series. And the book is titled The Haze Problem in Southeast Asia, Palm Oil and Patronage. And perhaps to mention that also, Dr. Helena, you have also advised diverse institutions across the region, with ASEAN as a governing body there, but also within Indonesia, within Malaysia, with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, for example, as well as the Academy of Sciences of Malaysia. So, brief introduction, the floor is yours, and I'm really looking forward to hear your thoughts about the talk we just heard. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the very, very kind introduction. And I am really very honored to get this opportunity to discuss Professor Noboru's work. You mentioned that he has been working in Sarawak and the Sarawak landscape for 3 decades. I am just a baby. I have just been looking at this for the past 1 decade. So I feel like I am really very much a newbie in this, but I will try my best. Neither am I an anthropologist. I do international relations and a bit on political geography. So the talk and also the papers that I read that was given to me to read, and also how I have encountered Professor Noboru's work in the past, was always very interesting and more of like very, very new to me, because all of this is something that I don't really think about in my daily research, but it's really nice, interesting information that will lend richness to my analysis. So what I found really interesting about today's talk was actually Prof's depiction or identification of what is happening in Sarawak right now as a crucial moment in this history, and how he actually identified or compared the difference with Peninsula, which has a very much more longer history of plantations. So I feel that oftentimes people sort of talk about the Malaysian plantation sector and also the Indonesian plantation sector as a whole, and they don't really break it down as what Prof has done. So he has talked very specifically about the Sarawak situation. But indeed, when I realize that myself, I have often done that as well, talking about the sector as a whole. But when you do think about it, the peninsula where I'm from, I grew up in Kuala Lumpur. Palm oil has been a part of the peninsula for much, much longer than Sarawak. And just 2 years ago, I believe, Malaysia celebrated its 100 years of palm oil. We had a great big celebration at the first palm oil plantation in Selangor for 100 years of palm oil. But actually, this is not true. It's only 100 years in very specific plantations in Peninsula. But like Prof pointed out, in Sarawak, it's a very different situation. So I think this really informs how we can understand the palm oil politics that's currently developing in Malaysia. Internally, not so much externally, because externally we always talk about Malaysia versus the world. How are we supposed to push back against all the negativity that the world is pushing against Malaysia? So this is a lot of my research has sort of gone into this, how do we balance this need for sustainability, which is largely promoted by the North, but at the same time, it is a very important issue for us as well in the South. So it's sort of externally guided, but at the same time trying to contextualize it to a local context. But what I'd like to talk about today is how we can understand what is happening in Malaysia more in a more organized manner when we actually divide what's happening in Peninsula and what's happening in Borneo, or more specifically what's happening in Sarawak. So a lot of the politics of Malaysian land use right now, if we look back, it's always been this debate about deforestation. Should Malaysia be allowed to deforest in order to develop? This has been the debate since Rio, and our governments have been pushing this for a long time. At the moment, in the Peninsula, the opinion and the situation on the ground is very much more different compared to in Sarawak. For example, in Malaysia, in the Peninsula, we often say, or rather the reality is, because we are so densely populated in the Peninsula, there's not much more land for expansion anymore. The plantations that are there will likely be it. There's not going to be much expansion. If there is any more expansion going to happen in Malaysia, it's going to happen in mostly Sarawak. Not even so much in Sabah. It's going to happen mostly in Sarawak. And as Prof has actually pointed out, there's so much change happening now. There's so much shifting. People are deciding whether should I convert my plots to palm oil or should I remain? There's big choices being made here. There's big changes in societies, in families, and all that. So currently, what becomes really difficult right now is how to handle the Sarawak question in Malaysia. So when we talk about deforestation, it is Sarawak. And then when we talk, when the central government talks about we should limit the expansion of palm oil, Sarawak gets very worried because it's not going to make much of a difference to Peninsula. It's going to make a big difference for Sarawak. You see, and Sarawak is the one who always says that at the moment, in the past, the Peninsula would say that, yes, we have to use what we are given by God. This is our right and all that. But that's already been used. In Sarawak, it's still a very current question. Just a few weeks back, there was an Instagram post by one of the Sarawak ministers that actually showed a wide expanse of forest, of green forest. And then the caption said, this is God's gift to us. We have to figure out a way how to unlock this so that Sarawak can be prosperous. And in the comments section, you can see that the opinion was so divided. between people who said that, yes, this is a great opportunity for us. We have to figure out how to monetize this and everything. And on the other side, people saying that he's so out of touch and so out of tune, that, we should be taking care, especially the situation right now, when we're all really bothered, we're all really talking so much about climate change and about deforestation. It's a real tone deaf kind of picture and a post to put up. So this whole thing boils down again to Malaysia's state system, where we have a federal state system, where the state really has a lot of independence and a lot of power to determine a lot of things, especially to do with land use. And this has made it very difficult for the I can't remember the word now, but to make the policies align with each other, both at the central and at the state level. Sarawak is really very pressured. It's the poorest state in Malaysia. Among all of the states in Malaysia, it's the poorest state in Malaysia. So you cannot really blame them for being quite nervous about this. How is global trends, global concerns with sustainability, with deforestation going to affect Sarawak's ability to develop and to provide for the needs of their poor? So I think what Prof has really highlighted today is to show that, number one, the Malaysian plantation sector is not a uniform sector. And number two, what is happening on the ground, where Malaysia is finding it so difficult to navigate the politics of palm oil. It is not just at the international level, where we often think that, oh yeah, it's Malaysia against the world, it's Malaysia and Indonesia against the world, but it's really a struggle that is happening locally as well. Most simply, in terms of is Sarawak going to go along with the national story, the national plan, and all this? From my works and my associations with NGOs and with other community actors and all this, there is always this anomaly of Sarawak. It's difficult to work with Sarawak. Sarawak is always kind of on a different track compared to even Sabah, actually. So I think the Sarawak question is so difficult, but at the same time so important as well. So for example, like what Prof. Noboru said about these riparian communities converting to land-based communities. My husband is from Lundu, Sarawak. I don't know whether Prof. is familiar with that village. And indeed, when I visited, there's the river there, and at the same time, there's a gravel road coming up to it. You see, so it's not even tarred yet. So we can really see the shift. Only now, roads are being built into these communities, and of course at the same time rivers are being eroded. It's becoming brown and dirty because of all of the silt happening. So the shift is very real, but at the same time, they need to be connected. They need to be able to go to the city, So it's a really difficult debate, and I think this is something that I've been looking at for my time as a scholar here. And I really think what Prof is doing is really important. And just to highlight that things on the ground is when you look at things on the ground, you cannot generalize, and this just gives more context to the political debates that's happening in Malaysia now concerning palm oil. So I think I'll stop there. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Helena, for this response and discussion of Noboru's talk. And perhaps just to pick up also with your background as a political economist, maybe one important question to ask is who benefits from all of that? And who benefits from the plantationocene and these plantations that are established by whom? With this, I would like to open the floor for questions from the audience online, as well as I'm looking here in the room. I have the honor to be in a room full of people, Not that full of people though. I should say. So any questions here or in the online audience? I would also like to flag that Noboru already pointed out, and maybe Noboru, while people are still reflecting on their questions, maybe if you don't mind, because you had very interesting background also here in your slides while Dr. Helena was talking. And I think maybe it's important also to link back to some of the rhetoric, this discursive ideal of the plantation that was also reflected in some of the quotes that you put up there. Perhaps a short reaction from you, Noboru?
Could I have your question once again?
I just saw that you highlighted some very interesting quotes, and I wondered if you wanted to have a minute or so to highlight a little bit what you put up there earlier.
Historical quotes of...
From the Gazette, from the Borneo Gazette from 1903.
You saw it. I
yes,
see.
Because you're still sharing your screen, perhaps.
I see. Because my research was based on the reading of the Sarawak Gazette. It's a colonial report, first published in 1871 up to 1963. And this is a colonial report, very detailed report made by colonial officers stationed in outposts in Sarawak. And what is interesting is these colonial officers should be the fluent speakers of local languages, not Malay, but local dialects. So that what they did was, I suppose they have lots of time to kill. So they jot down everything, how many durian holes a boy got from the fallen durians. And they reported to the Raja in Kuching. So this is a kind of treasure island for Sarawak anthropologists for investigating the daily lives. So that, for example, let's see that this is the report of the area where we conducted our field work. Binti, this is 1895, and nothing of great importance has taken place. In fact, with nothing of great importance has taken place. He always wrote this way, but many interesting things are happening here. So, for example, this is the one. This is a quote from the Sarawak Gazette, September 2nd, 1903. While I was in Tubao, some 10,000 bundles of rattan were either in Tubao Bazaar or on the way over from Bulaga, and thousands of dollars, silver dollars, go over to Bulaga due to the high price of rattan during the year, and the consequences is a shortage of silver dollar here. So what is really intriguing is, usually we thought the inland of Sarawak in 1903 it was a real frontier, but actually, by reading this, we can understand that this is really the center of the commerce, and this, tropical forest was part of the global commodity chain, so that people didn't cultivate rice, but they purchased rice from Chinese traders, and they have lots of money, the silver dollars. So this kind of, archival information is very vital, and as an anthropologist, very much history-informed anthropologist, this is a treasure island. And sort of, in order to make history out of this kind of documentation, we can take a look at the people. Usually people thought to be the people without history are the people with history. So this is the introduction of my treasure island, the Sarawak Gazette. So
thank you so much, Noboru, for flagging that again. And I see that we by now have Karen Heikila, who raised her hand. But Karen, before you take the floor, I would also I'm looking here at Rachel's comment in the chat, but maybe Rachel, you want to formulate your question directly, if you can.
That would be nice. Hello, so can you hear me?
Please introduce yourself very quickly.
Okay, sure. So I'm Rachel Hamilton, and I'm from Sabah, so Kota Kinabalu. And but I'm based over here now in Finland, and working at Natural Resource Institute of Finland. But my doctoral research was on West Kalimantan. So, and also on this kind of political, what do you call, I guess political ecological perspective on community forest management and decentralization. So what I'm wondering is, so this area you're working in, which is North Sarawak, so I know this is an area with a substantial degrry of internal diversity of ethnic groups and lifeways. It's a very, very diverse place on its own terms, counting out 70% of Sarawak. Just look at the north, already very complicated. So I'm wondering, in this specific area, did you engage much with like differences in like this process? For example, I know that there's been a history of like, for example, we already know that this area was an area where people moved, a lot of Panan people moved from, hunter-gatherer, more related, more that, to more settled in recent years as a result of a number of different, government and also individual actions. But then now we have this resource frontier, and we also have groups further inland. So I'm wondering, was there a difference in how this played out in terms of ethnicity or in terms of what was there before for different people that you detected as something important? Thank you.
Yeah, there are differences in ethnic groups in terms of the reaction to the land grabbing by companies. As you know, the Punan people are so mobile, and they are using forest as a source of income and food. So they even were not engaged in slash and burn agriculture. So they cannot mark any, the ownership in the landscape. So people are suffering because they cannot claim any land rights against the encroachment of plantation companies as well as timber companies. And Iban people, they are also very mobile, but they have been engaged in slash and burn agriculture. So they have some degree of land rights and having court cases with companies. And also Kayan and Kunya people are less mobile. So they have been there for many years. So they have rather successfully claimed their land rights, so that there is a kind of gradation in terms of the access to the land and the possibility of claiming the land rights. So ethnically, there are so many variations in terms of the reaction to the land encroachment. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Noboru. Thank you, Rachel. The next one in the chat who raised her hand was Karen Heikila. And then we have Grace Wong as a questioner. Karen, the floor is yours.
Hi there. Thanks very much, Professor Noboru, for your interesting talk. I guess my question kind of follows up on Rachel's. I was kind of wondering which communities you were actually, sort of talking about when you gave your lecture.
A very good question, because actually I have been working on almost all the ethnic groups officially recognized in Sarawak. Because if you take a look at the riverine society in Binti area, which is about 250 kilometers long, we can find almost all the ethnic groups along the side of the river, starting from Malay and Melanau, and then Iban people everywhere, and Kayang, Kunya, and then up in the highland, we have Penang people. So that the reason why I chose this riverine society is to take a look at sort of the microcosm of Sarawak ethnicity. So I dealt with all the ethnic groups, even though I speak only Bahasa Malay Sarawak, right, and very limited Iban dialect.
Right. Yes, I was interested to know how many of these communities, still perhaps carry out subsistence farming. I mean, I don't know how many are, still maybe hunter-gatherers, maybe not many, how many are, horticultural. I'm not very familiar with the Borneo, side.
Very good question. Very good question. I have to answer. With the advent of plantation, oil palm plantation, people immediately gave up slash and burn agriculture. So I don't see anybody doing it at this point for as subsistence activity, but sort of as a transitional device for making a plot for oil palm plantation. They are engaged in slash and burn agriculture for 1 year, opening the forest and setting fire. And then after this, just 1 year, they plant rice, but after that, they plant oil palm. So that this is a kind of a transitional way of utilizing the slash and burn agriculture in order to secure their land for oil palm cultivation.
So are you saying that the planting of oil palm is sort of rotated with the planting of, is it hill rice that they plant?
Yes.
And now I have to stop you, Karen.
But I have to answer one more question, please, of yours concerning hunting and gathering. It's revived because this is very interesting. Chinese people, as well as Indian and other people, value the tiny stone in porcupine. It's very expensive. It's a medicinal material for Chinese medicine. And people say, after eating porcupine, after porcupine eat plantation seeds, they develop stones in their stomachs, so that this tiny stone costs, the price of this stone is like you can buy a car, the gorgeous car. So that kind of frenzy hunting of porcupine is going on, so that many people became overnight hunters, and searching for animals in the tropical forest. So, and also after plantation came, the so-called pioneer plants on the field of oil palm plantation is, I forgot the name, Latin name, but the plant very much liked by deers and other small animals, so that many animals are coming down to plantation sites, as well as wild boars are coming to eat wild the oil palm seeds, so that it's a kind of revival of hunting activities among the people on the plantation frontier. So many things are happening, many interesting things are happening there.
Okay,
thank you very much.
Let me very quickly hand over to Grace for the very last short question of today.
Thank you.
Introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm Grace Wong. I'm also from Malaysia, but at the Stockholm Resilience Center in Sweden. Thank you very much, Noboru, as always, for inspiring talk and also for the great commentary by Dr. Varkkey. I guess my question, I'll try to make it short, but it is actually related to the both of you. I find your discussion, Helena, that about the discourses and the narratives that with oil palm, while there is this us versus them narrative, there is also a narrative within Malaysia. And I was wondering how these different narratives kind of fall into the places in Sarawak where Noboru is working. So how do people interpret and translate these discourses into how they are, you know, making their decisions, whether it's the local government or the local people? And then as a follow-up thing, I mean, I know as we are in Europe, we also know that, for example, the EU is banning deforestation, oil palm, and how are those kind of now global sustainability narratives being played or being translated by the different levels of politics within Malaysia? So a short question, but perhaps I look forward to long answers.
I believe with these questions we could have another hour of discussions. Now we are in Finland, and there's always this need also for really being in time. But I still would ask, perhaps I start with Helena for your commentary and maybe also as a closing statement, followed by Noboru. And I apologize for everybody here that we will go slightly over time. Please forgive us, but I think this deserves a bit more attention. Please, Helena.
Thank you. Actually, I wouldn't be able to comment much on that. I don't think I can because I'm not an expert on the Sarawak on the ground. But just in terms of what I've been able to pick up, that there is definitely a very unique conversation happening in Sarawak. I work a lot on peatlands, the peatlands issue, and I think the peatlands is really bringing everything together. Sarawak often says that its peatlands are unique compared to the rest of the world, even compared to Semenanjung peatlands, peninsular peatlands. So I think there's always this idea that we are unique, we are different, and we should not be held to the same standards or to the same concerns of peninsula. So I think that is all that I can say for now in terms of that. But in terms of the current international developments about EU having their supply chain law, their deforestation law, I think this all is just it is a continuation of how Malaysia and Indonesia has been engaging with the EU, with their RED, what do you call this? The RED law as well, RED2 law. So I think it's just sort of a continuation, somehow a re-strengthening of this concept that the EU is just trying to destroy the Malaysian palm oil sector, which I don't think is helpful for anyone. So I think it's all part of the same trajectory. And I think Malaysia needs to really move beyond that. And I think EU also needs to move beyond that as well. But that's a whole 1 more hour conversation that we need to have. So I'll just stop there. Thank you.
With that, I would say, Noboru, perhaps some closing thoughts, remarks from your side.
Let's see, the bigger picture, just Helena was talking about, is not my comfort zone. So maybe I can say something about micro situations in Sarawak. My talk was kind of a snapshot, one time shot, which we had during our research in 2010 and from 2010 to 2014. So and it's a still picture, and the things are moving and changing. So I'd like to do some research once again. So because of COVID, I heard that the Punan people have began slash and burn agriculture because all the supply chain of jungle produce has been disrupted. So they sort of came back to a very, very original cultivation style of neighboring people. So they imitated the slash and burn agriculture. So that many, many interesting things are happening. So we should be back on the field when the COVID situation allows. So let's see. I'd like to report something new to you next time we get together.
Wunderbar. Thank you so much, Noboru. And perhaps for me, to close this discussion, I have to say personally, I still wonder who in Malaysia, who in Sarawak is celebrating Plantation Day or Palm Oil Day. Is it the central state that might have appropriated this whole and embraced this colonial plantation scene that Noboru introduced us today to, and how that then also leads to tensions between subnational rejection, subnational embracement of plantations, perhaps to some extent as well. And not only in Malaysia, what is the concern of our projects, these research projects we are currently working on, is of course also to understand plantation dynamics in the Congo Basin and elsewhere. And really, thank you again so much, Noboru, and also Helena, for your contributions today that will inform and inspire our research design and our work in these different localities. And with that, I would like to hand over to Professor Franklin, who will close this whole event and maybe say something about the Global South encounters. Thank you so much, Franklin, for allowing us to have this event here in this wonderful setting of the Global South encounters in Elsos. And maybe some final words from you before we close. And I apologize for everybody for going over time. This is really a very big sin, I think. So thank you for allowing us to do so.
Thank you so much, Maria. W. Arthur Lewis, the only Black economist to have won the Nobel Prize in Economics, is central to development economics. Professor Noboru's quotation of W. Arthur Lewis's words is therefore appropriate. Lewis was, of course, a towering figure in theorizing industrialization and economic policy in Ghana, where, at the risk of sounding nationalist, the model for Malaysian oil palm plantation was exported. In Ghana, the model was abandoned, of course, but with much regret, according to many development economists. Professor Noboru's work and Dr. Varkkey's response, however, show clearly that perhaps it was not a bad idea to abandon the model with all its tensions and contradictions in Ghana. However, the tug of war between ethical, economic, and ecological processes continues. Global questions which Afro-Asian, indeed Global South experiences can help to re-theorize. Clearly, we need more encounters, so others will follow. Our next encounter will build on today's webinar, taking place next week on 15th December. It will be centered on the topic coal and energy in South Africa. Our speaker will be Professor Marie, Professor of Development Studies at the Center of Development Support, the University of the Free State, South Africa, who will be reflecting on his latest book, Coal and Energy in South Africa, Considering a Just Transition, which has just been published by Edinburgh University Press. More details about the talk and our speaker can be found on the HELSIS Global South Encounters webpage. We shall share additional details shortly. In the meanwhile, I'd like to make 3 points. First, we'd be pleased if you could send us some feedback on how to further develop the encounters. Second, please join me in thanking my colleagues, especially Sarah and Maria, for helping to make today's webinar a great success. What they have offered is not simply disengaged sustainability science, but critical core for a democratic science of sustainability. Finally, please join me in thanking Professor Noboru and Dr. Varkkey for echoing, indeed emphasizing the best traditions of inspiring constructive scholarly engagement and civil political activism, which define the HELSIS Global South encounters. Thank you very much, everybody, and see you soon.